Okay, good morning, everybody. So this is the color training or color best practices training for the service team. So without further ado, I'm going to start with this. You guys all get questions like that. You know, hello, Ricoh service. You know, the color is not right. What can I do to match my color? And again, that's why we're doing this this agenda here. We're going to do some color management basics. So I'm going to give you 4 slides here with a lot of information about just going back to, you know, color management, you know, science and everything. Then we will go section calibration, really go through step by step to the calibration. We have another section for the color settings and the profiles, specifically on the Fiery. And lastly, we're going to talk about spot color handling. All right, jumping right in. So bear with me here. Color basics. So you will remember this from color science class. It's important to understand why we're actually printing using CMYK. The visible color spectrum to the human eye are the wavelengths from about 400 to 700 nanometers. So the big regions are red, green, and blue. A lot of you remember that, but this is why red, green, and blue are called primary colors of light. So monitors, projectors, or your phone screen are examples of this. It's called additive color mode or system. So meaning the light source is off, you see black. The light is full on, you see white, which is actually equal amounts of red, green, and blue. So understanding the absorption and reflection, and you see that here on the bottom right, the reflection on surfaces, that's why we use cyan, magenta, and yellow when we're printing ink on paper on other substrates. So in theory, 100% of CMY would give us black, like in the middle there, but the middle actually, it's only like a brownish imperfect black. So at the 4th channel, we use black, and that's traditionally in the printing industry called key. Voila, there you got your CMYK. So color spaces. So we talked about RGB and CMYK. These are color spaces. These color spaces have a limited gamut, especially CMYK. The gamut defines all the colors we can reproduce within a specific color space. So the diagram on the right, you see all the colors. The outside is, you see all the colors the human eye can see. And within, you see the limited gamut of CMYK and RGB and some others. So you see you lose quite a few colors there when you go to that space. In order to describe all the colors we can possibly produce, you know, depending on where we go later, we need a device-independent color space called Scilab, or short B. So you can see that all 3 dimensions here are defined with values for lightness. There's a green axis and a green to red axis and a blue to yellow axis. Again, not to vary too much. We're not really dealing with this value so much, but it's important to understand. And this is really why, because really the concept of color management is that we have a device-independent color space like lab in the middle, and then you're using ICC profiles to convert colors to the specific device-specific color specs and capabilities. So luckily, our Fiery software and other programs take care of that for us, but there are some important settings we will look into later. So bear with me, this is the last very busy slide. Really, it's kind of like talking about delta E. So when analyzing color on a high level there, you will hear customers or color specialists talk about delta E results or tolerances. What does it mean? Where does it come from? So using a spectrophotometer measuring in LAB, we can analyze and verify pass and fail criteria using delta E values. Delta E is the color difference between a target and a measured sample. So, and again, just looking at a little bit in the middle, you see the difference there. When you have a delta E of like, you know, 0 or 1, the human eye cannot really see the difference, you know, those lower numbers. But when you measure stuff, you see pass-fail criteria, and sometimes a customer says, oh yeah, for a certain industry certification, I need to pass delta E5. So this is how this goes when you basically compare, and you see again in the middle there, these LAB values. So we have calculations to get there. Just some kind of some background. Moving on, color management. The issue with color management, there's a lot of different issues which can influence color management. Obviously, we focus on the production piece of the digital device. You guys are, you know, fixing, keeping up a production print device, but all the other factors can influence how, you know, the variables for color. What factors can affect colors? Obviously, the engine itself, the environment, you deal with that every day. The calibration, very important. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But even when that's all stable, you might have media. You change, the customer change media and something looks different, prints different. The viewing and the lighting, you see at the bottom in the middle here, you see the metamerism indicators. You hopefully saw some in the past. I have extra ones of these, can definitely give you one. When you have that at a customer, you obviously have a good start of a conversation because the right one indicates that the lighting in that room is not correct and they see a cast because of the insufficient lighting. And then lastly, fiery color settings and job color settings. And we'll talk about that a bit because that's what we can check what the fiery overall has set and what the specific job has set. Okay. Reminder, calibration is important because if you don't calibrate, you might have what we have here on the left. So you're all over the place. There's, kind of like no consistency. If a customer have a calibration workflow, kind of like, or you can actually help them doing that, or we can help them doing that, then at least they're hitting the same area consistently. And even better would be having calibration and custom profiling, but that requires additional software. Then they can hit a specific target. In the middle, it would indicate you go by the canned profiles, but at least you go there consistently. And here's a visual just to show you. I mean, obviously on the left, you see something where there's a really bad cast. And just by calibrating, you can actually fix that. So basically, without even measuring, and that's really important, you really want to use some of these many forms we and the customer can use. A form like that, actually a test form, will show you that visually, actually, you have gray balance, the highlights and the shadows are kind of sufficient. And without even measuring, you will normally see that you're kind of like fixed something with the calibration. Very important when you actually work on one specific customer file, and maybe the customer says the color is not right, but let's check if the machine is right. Bit of a wordy slide. Basically, the point here is whenever we calibrate on a fiery, we basically updating these calibration sets. So either we create a new one or we update one. And they are tied, these fiery calibration sets. They're done for default color profiles, and there are 3 different types. There's plain, coated gloss, and coated matte. That's important. And the troubleshooting tip for me is actually go to the job properties and find out what we just used. And you will learn more about this in this presentation and also in some of the other ones we're doing with you guys. So very important because sometimes even customers don't understand what they're doing. So now we're going to go through the different steps of the calibration. So basically, when you hit in Command Workstation at the top, calibrate, it gives you 2 choices, either recalibrate, which is the fastest after you checked what calibration you want to be using, or you create a new calibration. So I'm just going to guide you through a couple of those steps here. By default, when you make a new one, the name is the fiery server plus the date and time, as you can see here. And you may have noticed that you see a G7 button. That is only available if the customer has the additional software called Color Profiler Suite. Then you get like that window, you can do kind of a bit more advanced calibration based on G7 and again, spectrophotometer data. However, most customers will not have that, so that's grayed out. Then you choose the instrument. Obviously, most of the time it should be the ES2000, the handheld spectro, but on the 7000 and 9000 series, we have an automated inline sensor. So if available, you might want to do that for recalibration. So basically in this, the other screenshots here, when you select the ES2000, then you also need to select what kind of patch set you want to do. And you see on the right the different variations you have. With Command Workstation 6.5, you also do have the one at the top right again, the 21 sorted patches. Some Command Workstation didn't have that, and they would only give you the one at the bottom right. Last step before you actually do it, you always need to verify the media and layout. By the way, you will see, for example, in the color section that color-wise off, that's automatically done for you. So you really only have to make sure that you print with the correct media and layout, the correct paper catalog. Otherwise, you might again just do a different paper or a different setting. You always know that one. You have to put the device into the cradle actually and have the white point for calibration available. Here's some shots actually how that looks. Very important. If some customers, even if they have a spectral, they may have it only used it by hand. If you here on the left select the newer patches with a lot of patches, very small, you cannot do this by hand by itself. So you need the guide actually from your kit. That's just a reminder. On the right side, you do see what the machine outputs when you do the inline calibration, and it spits out automatically these 3 sheets there at the very right. And it's kind of like the concept is like this: when you select an inline calibration, even for the first time, you create a new set. It wants you one time to use the spectrophotometer, as we're doing here in the middle, to read do those readings. After that, basically, it has a data set and it can use the inline calibration for like recalibration. Because keep in mind, the inline the inline sensor is not a spectrophotometer, but it's more like a sensor, you know, a bit more basic. But that's the workflow, and you can recalibrate ongoing with that. So you follow the steps, you know, I mean, you all done that. And then at the last step, it asks you select an output profile. Well, because again, we talked before, this is the moment you make your new calibration and you tie it to a, you know, some kind of existing output profile. And that's the last step. Another thing here is there's an option, create output profile. That's again only available for customers who have Color Profiler Suite installed. And then just 2 slides, of course, really fast is if you choose to recalibrate, which is what you're probably going to do most of the time after finding out what are we using in our environment, then you just hit recalibrate as an option. You select, you know, what device, and if you have an automated inline sensor on the C7200 or C9200, then basically you're done after that, because the machine does it for you, updates everything, and you're done. And if you select your device, like in ES2000, then you still have to select the patches. So, you know, calibration done with that. Last one on calibration is, just want to show you, when you hit that calibrate button, as if you want to do calibrate, you can actually go to those 3 little lines at the bottom left, and that opens up the calibration manager. And there you can see all the named calibration sets, and you can actually see when they were last calibrated. You can even click on it and see, like on the right side, you can actually see the measurements again. So, summary on calibration, as I said, always want to find out when was last calibrated. Is customer using the correct calibration? Are they really sure what they're using? Again, plain versus coded. If you have a spectral, it's always better to use the spectral than you know, just doing it over the scanner. If the inline calibration is available, then that's an option, but you may have to communicate with the customer, you know, how they trained and if we're already using that. And then the G7 calibration is great when you have that, but that's only possible for Color Profiler Suite customers. So moving on to color settings and profiles. The color settings and profiles, we're going to talk a little bit about the ICC profiles, look at the settings, how they're slightly different in Command Workstation 5 versus Command Workstation 6. And then look at a couple more settings actually for the output profiles. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit. Again, an ICC profile is the, you know, stands for International Color Consortium. And it basically defines what the printer can print, actually. So you kind of convert everything for that output device, be it a monitor or a printer. Here you see the different gamut, actually, from Adobe RGB, which is a very large gamut on the left side, and then, you know, a CMYK print gamut of a plane for the C5200, which is way smaller. So the software needs to kind of like bring in those, you know, color points. And again, you're probably familiar with that. That's kind of like a Command Workstation 5. And I want to show you in the next slide, you will see how that looks in 6. So it's all still there, but it looks different. So in 5, we were used to, this is when you go in there in the device tab, you basically have the ability to see what are the settings when you drop in a PDF file. So what are the color settings when you didn't do anything else? It has those settings to start with. At the very top left here, you see is the CMYK source profile. That's usually Ricoh. Ricoh is a standard for offset printing in the USA. So that's really what we're using most of the time. You want to see that Ricoh there. Customers may have something like standard web offset printing there. And of course, you cannot just change it, but that's kind of, we try to educate the customers that ideally they have that setting there. Then you have the settings underneath for RGB. So what should happen to an RGB image when it's converted? And there are many options. And of course, they really change how the colors are changed. And then, further down, you see also special settings for gray and black here on the left side. What's really important, in the middle, you have the output profile, and that is usually the output profile which is used when you don't do anything else. And then next to it, you see the date of the calibration. So I like this way of presentation in version 5. In version 6, it's a little bit different. So in Command Workstation 6, you basically go on device and color management, and then you go to those settings there. But you see it's the same information. You still have a CMYK output profile. You have the RGB information, kind of pretty much the same. This is the second slide, kind of like following up on that. So again, fiery output profiles. So let's talk about the plain coded matte. How does that work? And can we change them, right? So again, if you go on Command Workstation, on the 3 dots next to the name of the server, you can go to Device Center. That's how you go to another area where you can select profiles. All the output profiles is what we see actually, and you see some actually have a lock, so you cannot change them. But that's basically where you have all those profiles sitting. And just to kind of go a little bit. Oh yeah, that's again what I just said. They're locked, but you can still change what calibration they are using. So that's indicated here when you click on that. And again, you will see when you go at some customers, depending on the level, actually, some have only the default ones, the plain, the coded, and everything. But you go to some customers, you can actually edit the profile. So if you click on it and say edit, I think it's right click and edit, then you can actually make curves. And this is the legitimate way to kind of make a little change. Like you do one, in this case, you had the magenta basically being reduced a little bit, and then you save it under a new name. At some customers, you will see a lot of those, which is a bit of a problem because you have to still manage that. But again, that can be done, and you will see actually some profiles there. So again, depending on the customer, they have their profile they're using every day instead of the default ones. So, and of course, if somebody has Color Profiler Suite and can make their own profiles, they will be here too. So identifying which profile was used, as I said before, that's really important. So if you go to the properties of your job, you can then check what's going on. And even if the customer doesn't select anything, it is basically kind of like assigned. If they have a plain or a coded job, they will use different calibrations. So here's some tips how you can do that. And one was actually, I didn't make those slides, but it's actually a good tip. Actually, when you look in the properties, you may see something like that, use job defined settings. And you don't see any more information there. And if you process and hold that job, you actually get some information about which calibration that's using. Okay, so that helps you to identify that. So the last section here is the spot color handling. So sometimes you will have customers talking about spot color handling. So we need to understand what does that mean. And obviously, when you send a file, the Fiery automatically does it for you. But sometimes you need to troubleshoot those specific colors. So let's talk about what is a spot color, and then also the difference between spot on and spot pro. And here's again the definition. A spot color can be all kinds of colors, but the PMS colors, the Pantone matching system, those are the colors defined by a company called X-Rite and Pantone. They're basically the standard for defining all color, and it helps basically kind of like for designers and in the industry to define certain colors, to say, I want that certain design color look a certain way. You have these Pantone books. We sell them actually to customers who don't have one, so it's really a helpful tool. They should all have one. They should be not super old and outdated, and they help us to kind of talk about these colors. The name is actually important in the digital world. So if somebody wants a Pantone space 415 space U, you definitely want, you want to have the ability, the name has to be correct. Like I said, if there's a spelling actually like John's Red was John's Red, the Pantone will not, the Fiery will not find that color automatically and bypass it and do the normal conversion. So that's important for customers to understand. Here's a screenshot actually. So you look at the library and you find one of those colors, just to kind of see how it's defined in the Fiery. And the Fiery will out of the gate tell you already, again, here's this delta, the delta reading actually. So it tells you there's a very bright pink here. And of course it will tell you automatically, well, when you print this in CMYK, you will have, this will not look like that color. It will look slightly different. So it's just an information there. So how to adjust it? We teach that to customers, how to adjust one of those spot colors. You can actually change the color as it is in the system, but we recommend always making a new group, and then putting actually a copy of that color basically in there. Here we define how that works. Any of these colors, you can actually print a comparison page, and that's helpful to kind of find out, how's your color currently looking, and how would that look when I go a certain direction on your certain surface. So that's very helpful, and we teach customers how to do that. Keep in mind that not every customer has that option. It's an optional feature. Some of the smaller Firies may not have that. And then here's another tip. Sometimes the customer says like, hey, but I don't know if this color is CMYK or a Pantone color or whatever. What's the name? And you can do that with Acrobat Pro. Here's a tip actually how you can find out. On the right, you see how a certain color is defined when you click on there. So it helps you to kind of see, what is that name of the color? Or is that really a Pantone color, or is it maybe a CMYK build? And then just want to point out that you hear, in the past, over many years, this feature was called Spot On. That's what most customers have. And as of late, there's a bit of an upgrade. They now changed it to it's called Spot Pro. It does the same thing, but Spot Pro has a couple additional features. But for all intents of purpose, in order to deal with the spot colors, you either have Spot On or Spot Pro. Again, as I said, depending on the package of the Fiery, but it's definitely something which can be added on if a customer wants to kind of like go more into handling spot colors. So we're pretty much almost done here. The reminder I want to give you actually, and I can actually switch back there to the screens, but the Fiery manuals are really good. If you go help on the command workstation, you can actually get description of all those settings when you say like what are these buttons doing and the color settings, and it's a printing and color section in the manual. Obviously you can go to EFI Learning. They're free classes and courses, very good. And of course you have us engineers to ask for support. If customers ask for advanced color management, we can help customers with that. That's what we do. We sell additional services and we help them. So it might require additional training and tools. For example, software would be a color profiler software to make your own profiles. And of course, they may not have a Spectro, obviously the handheld Spectro, but even if they do have a handheld Spectro, they might be interested in the larger ISIS scanner or the IO table, which is a robotic arm, which basically makes the difference when you measure a lot of patches. And lastly, of course, our group actually, you have customers, they don't want to deal with that. Maybe they want Ricoh to help them with their color services on a regular basis. So we do that too, so that we go, quarterly or whatever frequency to customers. That's pretty much it. So, and thank you very much for attending, and see you on the next one.
Thanks for the information, Ralph. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. Have a wonderful Friday.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.